Hello. In today's video, we're going to talk about the whole tone scale and how to play it on the guitar. The whole tone scale is a scale that is made up of notes that are all spaced apart by whole tones. Or they're all spaced apart by 2 frets each. This is a 6-note symmetrical scale, and because it is entirely symmetrical, that means that there can only really be 2 possibilities in a 12-note system. There's either these 6 notes or these 6 notes. And that's it. And this is a pretty interesting scale. It has this very nebulous, ungrounded sound. It's not a diatonic scale. There is no root note. There is no tonal center. It does not have a beginning or an end. And if you tried to create chords out of this scale, you would get augmented triads, or you would get augmented dominant 7 chords. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting scale. Let's look at some of the patterns that are commonly played on the guitar. So the most accessible pattern is kept within one hand position. It's pretty easy. This is what it looks like. You can also play this pattern. You can also play the whole tone scale up and down the neck a little bit. You can do this line. This is pretty nice. So there are a lot of possibilities to this scale. I mean, it is a symmetrical scale, so it has a very uniform shape to it. So it's easy to move about the neck with the whole tone scale. When it comes to chords, it is best played over augmented triads, augmented dominant chords like this one. It can also be played over dominant chords too, like regular, like a G dominant 7, which is made of the notes G, B, D, and F. And the reason why that scale works over these chords is because they share notes. The augmented chords that I mentioned, all of the notes in those chords are shared with the whole tone scale. This dominant chord, this dominant 7 chord, it shares 3 of its 4 notes with the whole tone scale. So the fact that there's a good amount of common ground helps make the scale and the chord work well with each other. Now, we're going to put this scale to use. Let's try this out in a simple 2-5-1 progression, which is the quintessential jazz chord progression. We will stick with C major and we'll add some 7s into the chords. So our progression will be D minor 7, G7, and C major 7. So, a pretty iconic chord progression. Now, the most approachable way to tackle this chord progression, at least when you want to solo over it, is to use the C major scale. And let's see what that sounds like. So yes, the C major scale sounds pretty reasonable, pretty safe, but let's say you wanted to make it a little more exotic. You wanted to add some spice into your soloing. You could use the whole tone scale over that G7 chord. So let's see what that sounds like. So the reason why the whole tone scale works pretty well here is because the G7 chord, it's a dominant function chord. It has tension. It wants to resolve to the C major 7. So by using the whole tone scale over this chord, we are complementing that tension, and we're making the closure at the C major 7 more satisfying. So the whole tone scale obviously can be used for dominant 7 chords. It can be used for augmented chords. It can also be used for minor chords, believe it or not. So for a minor chord, what you want to do is you want to use the whole tone scale a half step below where that minor chord's root note is. So in our chord progression, we are using the D minor 7. So let's use a C sharp whole tone scale. And the thing is, the C sharp whole tone scale actually shares all of the same notes as the G whole tone scale. So realistically, you could use the same whole tone scale from D minor 7 to G7 and then transition to the major scale for C major 7. Let's hear what that sounds like. And now you might be thinking, could we use the whole tone scale over C major 7 as well? And you certainly could. I think it wouldn't be as effective. And the reason for that is because the C major 7 chord in this chord progression is supposed to be a rest chord. It's the tonic chord. And playing a dissonant scale over a restful chord would be a little bit more disruptive. Now, you can totally do that if you're a more experimental or edgy kind of player. That's totally fine. But if you're trying to play in a more conventional kind of way, I would recommend using the scale to amplify the tension in the previous chords, and then when you have that resolution at C major 7, use something more conventional and more resonant that works with that chord. So to summarize, what I would do is I would first memorize and practice those patterns that I talked about a couple of minutes ago. I would then use those patterns to practice over a 2-5-1 backing track, and there's plenty of them on YouTube. I'll link one in the description. And what you should do is you should practice navigating between the whole tone scale and the major scale and see what kind of cool motifs and lick ideas you come up with. And once you get pretty comfortable practicing over a 2-5-1, then you can take it to the next step. Try a jazz standard, or maybe try one of your own songs. Try a metal song. But that's where I would start, with that 2-5-1 progression. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you had any questions or wanted to learn more about this topic or about guitar in general, leave a comment. I also teach lessons online, so you can meet with me one-to-one. Check out my website, which is in the link in the description. That's where you can find the lessons page. And I'll see you in the next video.